What's up? This is Technically Correct with Tyler Bischoff. And on today's show, we're going to get into UNLV's recruiting class, the transfer portal. They got 6 players coming in. As of now, are any of them actually any good at basketball? Is UNLV going to go to the NCAA tournament? We'll get into that and more. Technically Correct is back. I'll get more into what's happened and happening with Technically Correct a little bit later in the show. But for the time being, the transfer portal has actually been active for UNLV, and they've got a team. Well, not a full team, but they could field a legitimate team. They could play a legitimate basketball game with the players they've gotten. On the last show that I did, we talked about some of the incoming players like Cam Miles, MJ Thomas, and Terrence Ford, but they've gotten 3 new players. So want to talk a little bit about the players they're getting, but also in totality, what Josh Pastner has gotten so far. I find myself both pessimistic about the overall chances for UNLV to go to the NCAA tournament and this roster being any good, but also a little optimistic about some of the players they're bringing in. So I think there is some hope out there for UNLV. So we'll get into all of that, and I'll complain about the Players Era tournament again because I love to do that. So first player I want to talk about is one that I think is fascinating, and it's Tyler Harris, who's transferring in from Vanderbilt. The Evan Maya transfer portal rankings has him as the 516th best player in the transfer portal. UNLV said he's 6'7" and a forward in their press release. I've seen him listed at 6'8" and as a guard other places. He shoots threes, so we'll see what his role, what his position actually is. But this will be his 4th school in 4 seasons. It was Portland, then Washington, then Vanderbilt. Do you care about that? Some people might. I don't. UNLV just needs him to come in and be good for 1 season. But that's the reality of it is. He doesn't need to be loyal to UNLV, so 1 season and should be good to go. But here's what's fascinating about him. His last season at Vanderbilt, this past year, there's really nothing to be excited about with Tyler Harris coming to UNLV. He played in 30 games. He played 12.8 minutes per game and averaged 5.5 points. He shot 29% from 3 at Vanderbilt. Bart Torvik's defensive player rating had him as the 8th best defensive player. And I'll give you the caveat, defensive player metrics are not the greatest, so I'll give you Bart Torvik's individual metrics, but how much do they mean? I wouldn't take those as oh my God, he's a great or terrible defender. But based on that, this is a gamble on a player at the end of a rotation for a power conference team who hasn't really done much. However, his previous season at Washington, he played 31 minutes per game, he averaged 12 points, and he shot 49.5% from 3. And Bart Torvik had him as Washington's 2nd best defender. And the previous season at Portland, he played 34 minutes a night, averaged 12 points per game, and shot 36% from 3. And by the way, was the best defender on the team, according to Bart Torvik. Now, that Portland team wasn't very good, but was still a plus defender there. So you have a 6'7" forward, maybe he's a guard, we'll see, that in his first 2 years in college played good defense and shot really well from 3. That's awesome. That is an incredible player to have. Someone with size, someone that can play defense, and someone that can hit threes all in one. That is fantastic. So how much weight do you put into last season where he wasn't a good defender, wasn't shooting the ball well from 3, didn't play a whole lot, versus his first 2 seasons where he played a whole lot and was really good, right? How much weight do you put into it? Oh, he's only played on 1 NCAA tournament team, and that's the one time he was bad, right? Washington didn't go when he was at Washington. Portland was bad when he was there. How much stock does that matter that the only time he's played on a good team is when he wasn't able to really get a lot of minutes? He's played 82 career games. That's 3 years worth of college basketball games. It's still not a huge sample size to really be like, this is who Tyler Harris is, to really know. So I think there's real reason to be excited about this, right? UNLV is not going to play the same level of competition that Vanderbilt just played in the SEC this past season. And for UNLV to have a successful season, they don't have to be as good as Vanderbilt was this past year. So I am excited about Tyler Harris. I think the profile, the type of player is one that you should always want. Somebody that can play defense and shoot is, regardless of position and size, is extremely valuable. Someone who can do that with some size, it's a very, very important type of player to have. Now, again, he didn't shoot well from three at Vanderbilt. His defensive metrics, not great by Bart Torvik last year at Vanderbilt. If that's the player UNLV gets, then this isn't anything special. But if they get something close to what he was at Washington and Portland, based on these sort of initial numbers here, I think this is exciting, right? So Tyler Harris could be really good for UNLV. That's one I'm optimistic about, even though last year was nothing special or noteworthy for UNLV. Now, the other two players UNLV have landed, not quite as fun, not quite as upside here. Dontrez Williams is transferring in from Lindenwood. He's a 6'5" guard. Evan Maya had him as the 804th best player in the transfer portal. So this is not a player that's coming from the end of a bench or end of a rotation of power conference. This is a guy who's taking a step up. And Williams was at Abilene Christian as a freshman. Didn't start a game there, by the way. Averaged 5 points per game. He transferred to Lindenwood and was there last year, his only year there. And he averaged 15 points per game for Lindenwood. So there's points, right? Like that's, I think, a big thing in the transfer portal is like, can UNLV land guys that score points? A lot of times you might not be able to. However, he was incredibly inefficient. His offensive rating was 94.5 last year at Lindenwood. To put that into context, in the Mountain West, there were 72 players that had a usage rate of at least 20% last year. So basically the 72 most used players in the Mountain West. Only 4 of them had an offensive rating under 95. And if you want a UNLV player to compare it to, Isaac Williamson's offensive rating was 95.3 last season. So Isaac Williamson did not have a good offensive season for UNLV. He did not score. He was not efficient at all. Williams was a little bit worse at a lower level, right? That's not good. And the big reason why here is in his career, he has shot 26% from three. Now, again, sample size in college basketball, it's 135 attempts. It's not nothing, but it is entirely possible that a guy has taken 135 threes and his next 80, he'll actually be much better. But both years he shot very, very poorly from three, and he's taken 204 career free throws. He's only made 58% of those. I don't think there's any reason to think that he is going to become a good three-point shooter. I think in reality, you might just be hoping that he becomes a decent free throw shooter. That would be sort of best case scenario is, hey, can he shoot free throws and threes? But maybe just the free throws is what you take. He also shot 54% on layups, which is not terrible, but is below average. But he took a lot of shots, and I think that's part of the key here. He took a lot of shots to get to 15 points per game. It was a lot of volume. And I would guess he's not going to be given that volume this upcoming season, right? I think it was 13 field goal attempts a game and 5 or 6 free throw attempts a game. I'm going to guess he doesn't get anywhere close to that volume for UNLV because I don't think he's going to be a top 2 option on this offense like he was at Lindenwood. So that should be a positive, and the efficiency in theory can go up if the volume goes down. But I wouldn't look at that, hey, he scored 15 points per game last year. He's going to come in and be this great scorer for UNLV. Based on his efficiency numbers, if he's scoring 15 points per game, UNLV's offense is probably horrible. It's probably bad if he's having to be one of the top 2 options. Now, there is a big positive. His defensive numbers by Bart Torvik, very good. He was Lindenwood's best defensive player, and they weren't good, so whatever that means. But he was a good defensive player both years of college basketball. So maybe there's a role as a defensive guard that he comes in and plays. I don't like guards that give you nothing shooting-wise, right, that kills your spacing, but maybe there is a role here where he can be better defensively. UNLV was bad defensively last season, so, they need something better defensively. Maybe this is what it is. Now, last one here is Jeremy Fomena, who is a transfer from Central Florida. He's a 6'11 center, and he was rated, I don't even want to say the number, 1,226 best player in the portal, according to Evan Maya. That's not good. He's another player who will be on his fourth school in 4 years coming to UNLV. He's played at Rhode Island, Mississippi State, and Central Florida. He played just 9 games in his sophomore year at Mississippi State, so there's not much to take from that. But his other 2 stops where he played basically the full seasons, he averaged 5 points per game as a freshman, 4 points per game as a junior. He has never started a game in his career at any of those stops. There isn't much in terms of defensive impact, according to Bart Torvik numbers, or really anything I've ever been able to find. His rebounding numbers are very modest, even when you adjust for time on the floor. His rebounding numbers don't really jump out as anything special. This feels like getting size for the sake of size, which isn't the worst thing in the world, but that's what this feels like. And, like there's experience. He's been in college a while. Maybe that helps. Maybe something clicks his 4th year in college. Maybe there's something that Pastner and his staff can get out of him, but it just feels like a size for the sake of size with Fomena coming in. So UNLV's transfer class, right now, they have 6 incoming players with 2 returners. They've got 8 guys. Obviously, they're going to have more than 8 players this season, so there's going to be more incoming players, and these numbers will change. But as of now, Evan Meyer ranks UNLV's incoming transfer class as the 98th best in the country. And again, that's based on 6 incoming players. 4th best in the new Mountain West. The schools that are better are Grand Canyon, New Mexico, and Hawaii. Might be a little sobering that Hawaii's ahead of UNLV on the transfer portal list right now. But those are the 3 that are ahead of them that are going to be in the new Mountain West. Nevada's 7 spots behind. San Jose State's down at 138, so a bigger gap, but not too far. So there's a couple of teams that aren't too far behind UNLV as well. And if they land a couple of good transfers, they could jump UNLV type of thing. But they're 98th. They still have more players to add. I would say this. Of the top 200 players in the transfer portal, only 36 are still available. So UNLV's probably not landing a star player. Maybe. There's still 36 available, but it would seem as though they're not likely to get one. If they do, that's going to be great news. But it would seem as though they're not going to have one of these like, oh, wow, that's one of the guys that a lot of schools wanted. So if you look at this by incoming player, MJ Thomas and Terrence Ford are both in the top 400. Neither one's in the top 300, but they're both in the 300. So they're both in the top 400. Tyler Harris is 516. And then Dontrez Williams is 804. Cam Miles is out to the top 900. And again, Jeremy Fomena is 1,226, the best player in the portal. The comparison I want to give you is to last year. UNLV last season had one player that was a top 100 transfer, and it was Kamani Hamilton. He was in the 80s by Evan Meyer's rankings. Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn was 559, by the way. We'll get to that. But they had one player in the top 100 and then a bunch of guys outside the top 300, right? You look at Al Green, Emmanuel Steffen, Naz Cunningham, they were all outside the top 400. Howie Fleming was at 359. Laji Dembele and Miles Che were also outside the top 400. We didn't really see them play. But I think between Fleming and Green and Steffen and Cunningham, we saw why they were not top 300, not top 400, not top 500 transfers, right? Howie Fleming had a really good run towards the end of the season that was worthy of being the 359th best player in the transfer portal. Emmanuel Steffen, Naz Cunningham, and Al Green, did any of them do enough for you to say, oh yeah, they were severely underrated? No, not really. Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn did though, right? And should be some optimism there, right? Like Josh Pastner got a guy who was 559th in the transfer portal. And that guy was the Mountain West leading scorer, right? That guy was one of the best players in the conference. So you look at the guys coming in this year, a couple are in the 300s, one in the 500s. They can probably get another guy or two in the 400 or 500 range as well. Maybe they can do that again. Maybe they've got another all Mountain West first team player that's not really that well thought of right now in the transfer portal. But if you look at this as a whole, right? Last year, UNLV had one player in the top 100 in Kamani Hamilton, and he was good. He had some flaws, but overall, he was worthy, I think, of that ranking and addition for UNLV. But then they also brought in 6 guys that were not top 300. One was awesome. 5 were either hurt, lived right up to what their expectation was, or were kind of bad, right? But UNLV has 6 incoming transfers right now. None of them are in the top 300. What are the chances one of them is as good as Dre Gibbs Lawhorn? Not that great, right? Going from that to being one of the best scorers in all of college basketball, probably not going to happen. Will there be somebody that outperforms? Yes. We're going to be talking about whether it's Tyler Harris, it's like, 550. He should have been in the top 200, right? Somebody will outperform, but probably not to the level that Dre Gibbs Lawhorn did. But the real question is, how many guys are going to underperform? And is it 3 of them? Is it 4 of them? Because that's what UNLV got last season. Injuries included there. Can they get maybe 2 guys? You don't have to be as good as Dre Gibbs Lawhorn, but can they get 2 of these guys to be like, oh, they were actually one of the top 150 players in the portal, and then 3 more to kind of be what they were expected to be or a little bit better, right? Dontrez Williams can, instead of being 804th, can he be 550th, right? Can they get that? Because last year they really only got one player that truly overperformed what his sort of transfer portal ranking was. And if you're going to get a bunch of guys that are outside the top 300, you're going to need guys that actually outperform that, right? Can Pastner develop some of these players or unlock something? Maybe. Yes, Tyron Jones is back, right? That's a better start than where they were last year, right? And we all expect him to be better than he was last year. Isaac Williamson is back as well. Again, you're hoping he's better than he was last year. I don't know that he's good enough to make a huge difference, but this is the 98th best class. You only return 2 players. You're not good enough to go to the NCAA tournament as an at-large team, right? The 98th best class plus Tyron Jones and Isaac Williamson is not going to be a top 40 team in the country. Roughly speaking, that's where you need to be to get in the tournament. I guess that'll be a little bit pushed down, maybe top 50 because the tournament's expanding. But generally speaking, the 98th best incoming transfer portal plus Tyron Jones and Isaac Williamson is not making that jump up to 40th. So making the tournament as an at-large with this incoming class, I don't know. I don't see it. Now, I do have some optimism for you. 98th best class plus Tyron Jones is not terrible, right? It's not that crazy to go from 98th best to 40th best, right? We're not talking about a team that should be 175th, right? That would be pretty remarkable. 98th to 40th best, that is in the realm of possibility, right? Maybe it's only a 10% chance, but that's much better than a 1% chance. So it's not going to take a lot of things. It's not like everything has to go right for UNLV to be an NCAA tournament team or at-large team, right? A lot of things have to go right, but maybe not everything has to go right. So I do think like they're not crazy far away that it's not possible. The other positive outlook on this, can they win the Mountain West? Right? The threshold for winning this conference is now much lower. Grand Canyon and New Mexico are probably the top 2 teams or programs, however exactly you want to look at that. But after that, right, it's UNLV, and they should be in the mix, right? Nevada's going to be there. Hawaii, I guess, might be there. But like New Mexico and Grand Canyon are the best programs. They're probably the teams you're going to have to beat out to win the Mountain West. But they're not so good that you can't catch them, right? The previous version of the Mountain West, it was San Diego State and Utah State, who, I mean, how many times did UNLV beat either one of those programs out in the standings or in the Mountain West tournament in the last decade, right? And then beyond that, sometimes Boise State, sometimes Colorado State, sometimes New Mexico, right? There was this other group of teams beyond the best 2 that was like, all right, so for UNLV to win the Mountain West, they've got to be better than all of that sort of second-tier teams and the 2 top-tier programs in the conference. And it just didn't happen for a decade. Now, that sort of second tier doesn't exist. And the first tier isn't as good as what the first tier used to be. So it's much easier. And so can UNLV, I don't even think they have to do anything special. They don't have to be that good, and they could be the 3 seed in the Mountain West tournament and then beat 2 seeded New Mexico and 1 seeded Grand Canyon, right? That seems so much easier than, we're the 8 seed and we're going to have to beat the 9 seed and then the 1 and then the 4 and then the 3, right? Now it's just, all right, well, you could pretty easily get the 3 seed. Your first tournament game might be against UC Davis, some UTEP, they're probably going to be terrible, whatever. And then win 2 games against good teams, right? Decent teams, not even that good, maybe. That's much more doable. And like the 98th best roster plus 98th best transfer class plus Tyron Jones and Isaac Williamson can do that. That's not that crazy to actually do. So the lowered competition, like, it probably makes UNLV's resume for an at-large team worse because the strength of schedule isn't as good, but that hasn't helped UNLV in a decade because they haven't been close. So winning the Mountain West tournament is going to be a lot easier, and the talent on this roster should be there to make that feasible, very feasible, once we get to the Mountain West tournament. And we'll also see this year, can this conference get 2 teams in, right? Like, in theory, New Mexico wins the Mountain West regular season. They win like 24 games, and then UNLV wins the Mountain West tournament. Do both of them get in, right? Is this going to be a conference that has that respect? Is there going to be a team that has a good enough resume that doesn't need to win the Mountain West tournament? We'll see. I'd lean towards, probably not. They're probably not going to get that respect, but we shall see. So the roster right now, I think the sort of top tier on this roster is, you obviously have Tyron Jones coming back, who should kind of be the focal point of everything UNLV does. MJ Thomas is in the front court, great rebounding numbers, probably a plus defender, not a scorer in the front court, but like the 4th option or something, should be just fine. Seems like a very, very good starter for the Mountain West level. Same with Terrence Ford, should be a very, very good starter. Great shooter. There's been some injury concerns, but great shooter. Seems fine defensively at the guard position. And then I am optimistic about Tyler Harris. I know this last year Vanderbilt wasn't great, but I think he fits in this sort of top tier of UNLV players right now. Does he play on the perimeter? We'll see exactly what they do, but he shot well from 3 in his career. I think those are your top 4 players right now. And you have 2 good shooters and 2 non-shooters in that top 4, but those are your top 4. And I think that's probably a good defensive 4 as well, right? So I like that top 4. And then beyond that, right, you're talking about Dontrez Williams might be a useful player as sort of a role player, a defensive guard, something like that. Isaac Williamson, we'll see how much better he is. There were some moments last year where you could see it. Again, I've said this before, if you're going to the tournament, you probably want Isaac Williamson coming off the bench and not starting. But right now, he might actually be starting with the roster they currently have. And then to me, you have Cam Miles and Jeremy Femena, who seem like they're going to be further away from contributing. Like, you want them at the end of the bench. Cam Miles is only going to be in his 2nd year. He was at Florida State. Maybe there's something there, but that feels like the same argument we could have had about Emmanuel Steffen last year. Hey, he was a highly ranked recruit. He went to Arizona. He didn't play much. Now he's at UNLV. He'll be great here. And Emmanuel Steffen couldn't even get on the court at times last year because he was unplayable. And then we talked about with Femena, I think he's just size for the sake of size. I think Josh Pastner's done a solid job, right? I don't think it's awesome because I don't think this is a roster right now that you can clearly say, yes, they should be contending for an NCAA tournament spot, but he hasn't done a bad job. And I think he's done a solid job because they have 8 players and they're going to get more, and that's really going to determine it, right? If he brings in another player that, let's just say, is higher ranked than MJ Thomas and Terrence Ford, the 2 top ranked guys right now, this is probably a really good class. Right? If he brings in a guard who can shoot and is like the 280th best player in the transfer portal, this is probably a good class because that would, in theory, round out your starting 5 and make sure that you have 5 good starters and then everybody else can come off the bench. But if the rest of the guys he brings in are 511th, 489th, 962nd, it's probably not a tournament team, and it's probably not too close to being a tournament team, and it's not going to be bad, most likely, but it's probably not going to be good enough to go to the tournament, which is the bar that we use to judge everything. Now, last thing I want to get to on UNLV. They're back in the Players Era tournament. Is that a good thing? They played in it last year, and it was a miserable 3 games for UNLV. Some injuries caused part of that, but it wasn't good. The Players Era tournament, it's different, by the way. There's now 2 player eras tournament because they decided to expand the field to 24 teams, but also they needed to do a bracket because they got so much crap last year because they didn't, the way they determined the champion was just, oh, well, who has the best point differential among right. It was stupid. So now they did it in a bracket, but they made it 24 teams, which you can't do a clean bracket on. So they said, all right, we'll do 1 week with 8 teams and 1 week with 16 teams. Okay, so UNLV is in the smaller one. They're in the 8-team tournament. It is Kansas, Florida, Houston, 3 of the biggest programs in college basketball, and then Auburn, Notre Dame, West Virginia, Rutgers, and UNLV. Auburn's been a lot better recently. Bruce Pearl's gone, though, and his son didn't have the greatest first year, so maybe they won't be, but it's really like 3 dominant programs, and then it's just like, oh, what are you guys doing here? By the way, San Diego State's in the bigger tournament if you want to start keeping score between the Pac-12 and the Mountain West. But UNLV is going to play the week of November 16th, so good news, they won't play on Thanksgiving Day, but they'll play in the smaller tournament. Now, this goes back to how good is UNLV going to be, because I am not sure what the best case outcome is for matchups in this tournament, right? Because if UNLV is not good, if UNLV is the 110th best team in the country, I don't think you want to play Kansas, Florida, and Houston. I don't think you want to play one of them if that's where you stack up. Because, I mean, we saw it with Alabama last year. Like, the game was miserable. So if you're not good, like, yes, playing those teams will help your strength of schedule, but if you lose by 49 points, it's not going to help your Ken Pom or your net or anything like that. So if UNLV's not very good, you want Rutgers, you want Notre Dame. But if UNLV is decent, right? If UNLV is legitimately a tournament team or a bubble team, right? You want these teams. Because even if you lose, if you can lose to Houston by 7 points, that's going to help all of your metrics, right? That is a huge game for your metrics if you are competitive with Houston, with Florida, and with Kansas. Ideally, you're a team that's on the bubble, and we look back and it's like, oh, well, they played Houston and Florida in that tournament. They lost by 6 and by 9 in those games, and that will be something that boosts their metrics and maybe takes you from the outside to looking in on the bubble. So how good UNLV is kind of determines who you would actually want to play. Optimistically, the team's going to be good. And by the way, we're not really going to know. I guess they could lose the first game of the season to some crappy school again, and we will know. But we're not really going to know until probably January if they're a tournament level team or not. So we won't even know when these games happen. I guess we might find out when they play them too. But that's sort of my view going into this is like, normally, yes, you want to play the best teams in the country, but it was so miserable last year that I'm kind of like, do you really want to get beat by 48 points by Houston? Like, if you're just not good, I feel like that's a bad thing and can hurt you in the long run of the season. However, here's the other problem with it. Notre Dame last year was under 500 and 93rd in Ken Pom. Rutgers was under 500 and 125th in Ken Pom. Auburn and West Virginia were solid. Nothing special, but they were solid. If UNLV were to play the 93rd and 125th ranked teams in Ken Pom in this tournament, it sucks for the resume, and you'll say, what the hell are we doing? Like, UNLV can schedule teams that are 120th. UNLV can schedule teams that are 90th. Like, so I know I'm sitting here complaining about everything, but it just really comes back to like, how good is UNLV? Because you don't want this to be a miserable experience where you get nothing out of it from a fan standpoint, right? The players are going to get $1 million, but from a fan standpoint, you don't want to get nothing out of like, oh, we lost by 47 to Houston, thank God. Or we think we can go to the tournament and we beat the 120th team in the country by 11, right? Like those don't help you. And it's just, again, how good is UNLV? And they're kind of in the middle of maybe if things go right, they're on the bubble. But if things go kind of poorly, they're nowhere close and they're not good enough to play the best teams in the country. I know, I'm complaining about everything. It's what I love to do. You should know that by now. Last question I have on this. Did UNLV get paid? Did the players get paid from the last Players Era tournament? Maybe I should do some journalism on this, but Sportico, if you remember, had a story back in February where they were basically looking at the the Players Era tournament, and there were some teams that didn't get paid. And UNLV was one of those teams, apparently, that didn't get their money right away from the Players Era tournament. I haven't seen an update on whether or not that actually came true. I'm going to assume, might be dumb, but I'm going to assume they did end up getting paid. Otherwise, they wouldn't be back in the tournament that did not pay them last time. But we'll see. But that was sort of a big question mark back in, what was that, February, of, hey, where's the money for this? We'll see. Now, wrapping up the show here. I have not done a Technically Correct episode in a while, and I'm back now. I have an update. One, I told you guys I had a new show coming. I had a job. That's gone. I was going to be hosting an internet radio show. Basically, it was going to be a radio show. It was a daily morning radio show. But it was going to be online. It was not going to be on an actual radio station. The company that hired me was building out a studio, got a bunch of equipment for it, and they backed out. Canceled the show before we even got started. And it sucks. It sucks a lot. Actually, and it sucks more than when ESPN Las Vegas fired me, because I don't know, I'd been there for 7, 8 years, or budgetary reasons, whatever. We had whatever. It was a relationship that, in theory, you could say it's run its course. This one, I didn't even get a chance, right? There wasn't even like, oh, I did a show and it was like, this guy sucks. Get him out of here. Didn't even get the chance. It just, owner changed his mind and backed out of it. So, Technically Correct is going to be back and more regular. I got kind of lazy on doing this show because I was like, I have a job. I'm going to be doing a radio show and whatever. But I'm back. And I think the plan for now, this might change, and you guys can yell at me and tell me what you prefer. I'm planning on 2 episodes a week. Tuesdays and Fridays is my initial thought here. My recording software already crashed during this episode, so we'll see if everything works properly. But I'm thinking Tuesdays and Fridays. We'll see how that actually develops. I am all on board the NBA coming to Las Vegas. I'm surprised that it's happening, right? If you've listened to me on the radio or even on this show in the past few months, I didn't actually think they were going to do it. I thought they were going to use NBA Europe as their way to make money right now and push expansion, at least in the States, back. But they're doing both at the same time. Apparently, they haven't officially said so, but they're doing it. And I'm very excited about that. So there'll probably be some NBA news on this show as well. I love basketball and glad the NBA is coming. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you. I'm back. I'll be back sometime this week, whatever. We'll figure it out. I appreciate all of you for listening.